300 years ago, a woman, driven by jealousy, started a big fire to burn her servant and husband alive. But unexpectedly, the servant, before dying, cursed her with the most malicious curse, condemning her to wander the world forever, as an immortal ghost. In order to break the curse and be reincarnated, she had to stay on Earth under the name Sharon, making clothes for humans to redeem herself. And then, one day, 300 years later, while sewing in her shop, she suddenly pricked her finger, realizing that a special customer had arrived in her shop. She quickly opened the door to greet them, only to find out that the customer was the reincarnation of her servant from 300 years ago. She asked what brought her here, and the servant explained that her father had ordered a coat for her here 10 years ago, but he had never come to pick it up. Upon hearing this, Sharon listened as the servant tearfully recounted the misfortunes that had befallen her over the years. It turned out that shortly after her parents had placed the order for her coat, they had tragically passed away. She went from being a privileged daughter of a wealthy family to a tour guide who was constantly bullied by her clients. Not only did she fall victim to love scams and fraud, but even the only house her father had left her was mortgaged by her aunt to pay off a huge loan. Feeling hopeless about life, she swallowed a large bottle of sleeping pills and ran to a park bench, seeking to end her own life. As her consciousness began to fade, a newspaper suddenly fell on her head and transformed into a red coat right before her eyes. Then, her past self from 10 years ago, wearing the same red coat, appeared before her. When she woke up, she realized that her life had likely taken a downturn due to that very same coat. So, relying on her blurry memories, she found her way back to the shop. After hearing Hayler's story, Sharon turned around and went back to the shop to get the coat for her. As she was leaving, Sharon even offered to take Hayler home, but just as Hayler was about to thank her and get into the car, Sharon suddenly proposed a deal to her. Thinking that Sharon was joking, Hayler agreed without much thought. However, strange things began to happen the next day, as Hayler wore the coat and went to work. First, a colleague told her that a customer she had dealt with the day before had gotten into a car accident and was seriously injured for drunk driving. Then, in the afternoon, all of her colleagues except for Hayler had food poisoning from eating expired pickled vegetables in the cafeteria. Coincidentally, Hayler was given the opportunity to travel abroad on a business trip, as her boss went overseas for a cooperation negotiation. But upon arrival in the foreign country, Hayler mistook Jean, who was taking photos on the street, for a client, and went up to greet him. When Jean saw Hayler, he was stunned, as she was his childhood sweetheart who he had been searching for over a decade. Years ago, Jean's parents had an accident, and he was taken in by Hayler's parents to be cared for. The two of them developed feelings for each other during their time together. However, Jean went abroad after graduating from university, and Hayler's family encountered some changes, leaving Jean with no way to find her. Now that Hayler was standing in front of him, although Jean's heart was filled with excitement, he knew that it would be reckless to reveal his identity so hastily. Instead, he disguised himself as a photographer, and took Hayler around to take photos. Meanwhile, the woman who had saved Sharon and her servant from the cliff years ago, went to Sharon's shop and was told about the reincarnation of her servant that Sharon had seen a few days earlier. Sharon pretended to casually ask if the servant's fate in this life was to be her husband, but the woman told her that everything was fate and destiny.